And welcome back, everyone, to yet another edition of Going for Two, presented by Home Field Apparel. I am your host, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown, joined here by my colleague, Bryan Fischer. Bryan, how are you? It's good. It's been a couple of days. It's been a weird last 5-6 days. A lot of routines have been broken, but I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to see you.
I'm sure you're glad to be back. I'm just dying to know what you ended up eating there in New Orleans. It was a terrific trip for you, and I know you don't get out to watch much college basketball game, but you're kind of spoiled there with those kind of games that you saw there at the Superdome.
I was super spoiled. I think that one of the big regrets is I didn't have a chance to really leave downtown. I wanted to, go back to Uptown or the Garden District and see the old neighborhood. And we weren't able to really do that, unfortunately. But I had multiple delicious po' boys. I had some red beans and rice, which is, I think, an amazing thing to eat halfway through the serving for you. Remember what an absolute sodium bomb that it is. Just proof that I'm getting a little bit older. We had some pretty good Mexican food that which is not typically what you think of for New Orleans, and a major reason why I was there wasn't just to watch the basketball games, which we can talk about here first, but also to do some reporting and some coverage of a lot of the actual basketball coaches convention. It's funny right from the very beginning. Because I was kind of a late addition to this team. The flights from Chicago to New Orleans for most regular carriers were exorbitantly expensive. So I went on the Spirit, the little megabus of the sky kind of thing. So, and we're leaving at 5:30 in the morning on Thursday. And who are the kind of people that are going to be on a 5:30 a.m. flight? Division III basketball coaches. So it was like me and every little school, Wisconsin and like Central Illinois that I'd never heard of before. Now I had. We got to talking because we'd all been triple caffeinated to function there at that point. Let's talk about the basketball first, because you're right. I don't normally watch I don't think I watch as much regular season college basketball as you do, and I don't even go to that many games in person. I sure picked three really good ones to see. Right, you're in there with 70,000 people. You have what has to be one of the most emotionally cathartic moments for a North Carolina fan. And a really good, until maybe the last 45 seconds or so, national championship game. Like it was really cool to see that in person. And I'll say this, and maybe I don't know if you've had this experience or not. I don't get to watch a lot of college sporting events as a civilian, right? Normally, when I'm at something like this, even if I'm really enjoying it, I'm usually in a press box, or at least for part of the game. I might watch part of the game from the stands, but I'm usually going to be there. And in the closing seconds, I'm thinking about getting to interviews. I'm thinking about filing a story, and I'm thinking about dumb reporter stuff. It's not very often that I get to sit there in the stands and have a beverage if I want to, and share my personal feelings maybe about one of the coaches or teams that are playing there, and experience the whole enterprise as a regular person does. I think that's a valuable thing for us to do every now and again, just to remember what it actually is like, why we were interested in this profession in the first place, and what the experience is like for people that aren't interfacing with this as a profession. Like that, I think, was a very valuable experience.
And now I'm trying to think, at least on a non-soccer front, what might be my last game that I've actually watched from the stands. Because you're right, I do tend to get stuck in the press box, and like not only having to worry about filing, right at the deadline, which I usually am responsible for. Like you file the game right at the deadline as soon as the score goes final, which is always stressful too. You're writing a couple times, you're trying to hit, and then you're trying to run down to get quotes. It is definitely. I know I love our job. We get to go all over the country to see great events like this, but there's some stress involved in that job, and in those final few minutes after the score is gone final, you got to hit publish on something and hope that it's coherent and can tell this kind of story of what you just saw unfold. That can always be a little bit tough, but you're right, it is certainly a good reminder of that fan experience, which I think nowadays more than ever, really, folks are kind of understanding, hey, we got to make sure that the concession lines are short, we got to make sure that there are enough restrooms and that they're clean. We got to make sure that the concession options that you go out, not just having some decent beers out there for those that might want to get a little lubricated, but make sure that the prices are right. Make sure that it is a family event for a lot of these sporting events as well. I think the whole fan experience, it used to be just you'd chat about Wi-Fi and all that. No, it's about that moment when you're in the game, and really the times in between the action that I think a lot of ADs, a lot of people around college athletics are kind of revisiting right now. And so you're right, it is a helpful reminder to go do that. But it also helps, right, when the games are that good, like you ended up seeing this weekend.
It was excellent. I think, speaking of fan experience, let me just speak on one thing here. Maybe this is controversial, but I feel like in that vein, I need to get this off my chest. I have a lot of deep affection and affinity for the city of New Orleans. It's a great place to host championship events. Superdome sucks. And the Superdome sucks specifically for basketball. And the big reason is 71,000 people or 70,000 people, however many were there for the Duke Carolina game, is too many for a college basketball facility. My seats, thankfully were pretty close to court level. I think I was the 105 section, but I was near an end zone. And that meant that my view was partially obstructed because of television equipment and bandstands and other things. And when you're looking at a court from a 40-degree angle, even if you're relatively low to the ground, I watched at least 2/3 of the game on the television, on the projector, just because you don't have depth perception, and the corner of each court is obstructed by other things. There's a lot of places in that stadium where the sight lines weren't good, and the acoustics are not great when it's that big, especially for a game like this where you're going to have the Carolina fans on one side and the Kansas fans on one side, so it never really gets loud. My experience at that Grand Canyon game with 5,000 people was significantly louder as the experience. Maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't have a decibel checker or whatever, than the national championship game was, which feels a little stupid. And if we're being honest, the Superdome, the concourses are very narrow, and it's not really built to have that many people in that kind of setting. So your nose is shoved up into somebody's back the entire time you get up out of your seat. The prices suck. The pricing for the tickets dropped enormously for the championship game. You could have gotten into the North Carolina Kansas game for $25, which is pretty great. Far cry from these $600, $700 that you were seeing for the Final Four, but $13 for a hot dog, $20 for a beer, $18 for a beer. And long lines and everything that wasn't a good stadium experience. And I was thinking, I'm really glad I got to be here. As somebody who is predisposed to not really like Duke and a lot of the things that Duke basketball stands for, was it cool to be there and be around a bunch of Carolina fans? Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Was it a great? Was it a good? I think the fan experience honestly would have been better, even though I know the NCAA would never do this. If you play the games in Smoothie King, an actual basketball arena, and then you said, we're going to open up the Superdome. It's going to cost $8, and you guys can all watch the game on the big screen. And then the actual game will be in front of 23,000 people or something. Maybe not dissimilar to what the women's basketball tournament ended up doing, right? You're not playing that in the Viking Stadium, and you could see, they did this in Lawrence. People could go into the arena there and watch it, and a lot of people were there. I imagine they did it in some of the other campuses. So I know with the NCAA, it's got to have that ticket money. I know it's a cash grab. I know that's what they're doing for the future Final Fours, but it's not really fun if what you care about is the best possible view of the action. You know what I mean?
I completely agree. I mean, to start with, I have not covered a basketball game at the Superdome. Covered many football games. Been for a Super Bowl. Been for the College Football Playoff National Championship just a couple of years ago. And the thing that always struck me about it was even in football, you can be way far away from the action there. And I can't even imagine just being in person for a basketball game because the sight lines are what they are. I wish the NCAA, you're right, right, would get away from having these massive stadiums. I understand they want the ticketing revenue, but in terms of the experience, you mentioned with the women, I mean, the women's Final Four, that was just an awesome sight to see, there at the Target Center. And I think you can replicate that on the men's side. Yes, you would lose out in terms of the number of fans, but they play the NBA Finals at normal arenas. It's like, why does the Final Four have to be special and being played in these football stadiums? And truthfully, I think it would also open up some new avenues to where the NCAA could kind of explore to take the Final Four. That would be fun to kind of look at some alternate venues instead of going to the regulars in Houston and certainly in Arizona with their stadium. And it's like you kind of get trapped in this vicious circle of football stadiums that you're going to go to every couple of years. I wish they would kind of break out of that. Never going to happen, I guess, in the near term. But ultimately, I think it's always interesting because it's against the trend, right? I think for a lot of college athletics now, it's maybe downsizing, making sure that the experience is better.
Artisanal, small batch college sports. That's what people are doing more, right? And then this flies in the face of all that.
Yeah, and yeah, it probably is a money grab thing, but you just wish that they would go back. I mean, heck, the corporate changes they've made these last couple of years, I think nobody is really a fan of them. Like look at the freaking logos, right? Like I love the uniqueness of some of those old Final Four logos. You'd see them on T-shirts, you'd see them on stickers. I'm sure you have a few pennants in it back there, or not that might have a unique Final Four sticker. Like that was kind of the cool part of the Final Four, a little local flavor, and now it's all kind of just the same. And I wish they would kind of bring that in more beyond just changing the colors depending on what city you're in. We get it. It is March Madness, but it would be nice to kind of have a little bit of that local flavor, a little bit of certainly a nod to the fan experience. But let's face it, this is a television product. I'm sure that the powers that be in Indianapolis just like the fact that they can say, oh, we had 70,000+ people here for this event, and certainly the revenues associated with that. But maybe one day, maybe down the road, a new president will come in. They will supercharge and focus on things because you know what, those TV media dollars, they're not going to stop growing anytime soon. So maybe if you take away from one area, you can kind of get from the other. Maybe that will end up happening down the road.
Yeah, maybe this is something we'll try to actually bug somebody about later this summer. We can add that to the list of wonderful PDFs of great ideas in college sports reform that remain PDFs. I did want to kind of briefly talk about something else. The actual reason I was there, besides watching a couple of Kansas basketball games, right, is the basketball coaches convention, and there were a lot of these seminars where you are combining assistant coaches and head basketball coaches and athletic directors, and sometimes you have people from apparel companies, and sometimes there's some conference staffers that kind of came in and out. And this was really useful for me. One, to meet a bunch of people that I've only been texting or Zooming with. And I think it's nice for people to kind of put a face with the name and okay, yeah, Matt Brown owns Real Pants, and he can be professional in person, and maybe I could talk to him about something, which is that helps make the newsletter and this show better. But I think there were also some very candid conversations about the actual process of hiring a college basketball coach. I wanted to talk about a couple of the major themes from that. This was something I would have written about had my hotel had working Wi-Fi, but it didn't. What are you going to do? I think some of these run counter to what you might expect, and certainly a conventional fan narrative for how this process works. So one thing that I think became very clear to me after sitting in on tables and listening to mock interviews and case studies is that I think most fans would believe that the person who hires your basketball coach is the athletic director, and that there might be you might have the search firm suggest some candidates, and maybe they might help, do the initial phone screen kind of thing, right? The initial Zoom. But ultimately, the athletic director is the person that has overwhelmingly the most hiring authority. And that's the main person here. And we heard from time and time again, that's not really true. It's true at some places, but it's at the best case scenario, I would say here, a lot of different stakeholders are involved. That includes the university president, who quite frankly often has concerns independent of who is the best coach, to the extent that anybody can even define that, because you can't exactly predict it. The university president might be concerned about budget. might be concerned about the presentability of this coach with donors and with boosters. There may be political implications. There may be concerns, or the president may be interested in personality fit, ideological fit in a couple of different ways. The search firm plays often a very significant part, particularly if the search firm is the same search firm that placed the athletic director, or maybe placed the university president, or there may be some obligations to go with individuals there. In a couple of cases, I don't think this happens quite as often as people think, but it is a factor. Your apparel company may have a voice in some of these conversations, depending on how they're aligned. And it is not uncommon for an AD to say, I've interviewed 6 people, and based on my knowledge here of working with coaches, I think candidate X is the best person for this job. And the other people in the process say, that's cool, we're hiring candidate Y. And you, the athletic director, you need to sell it. And if candidate Y doesn't work out, I still might fire you. It's your ass that's going to get fired. Like, you're the person that's in charge of making this work, but it wasn't actually your decision. This tracks with what you had understood before too, right, Bryan?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've talked quite a bit on the show about alignment, and that is so huge in these coaching searches because, you got people pulling from all these different directions, and the higher profile the gig, I mean, the more people tend to try to get involved with the search. And look, you didn't even kind of mention some of the kind of boosters and alums that might just want to conduct a search on their own. That has been known to happen, especially at a couple schools in a certain conference footprint. I mean, look, this is the whole thing about making sure that everybody is on the same page. It's difficult to do, especially given the compacted time frame a lot of these hires have to be made. You're like, we got to get a guy in the next week or two after making a decision to fire a coach. And if you haven't done some of your homework beforehand, this is when you can kind of get into trouble because, you're right. The president might want something. Your chairman of the board might want something different. You got, various people that inside your own athletic department might have different opinions on, what the ultimate direction of the program needs to be. You have agents that obviously are getting involved in terms of either shying away, some of their clients from certain jobs, or kind of encouraging others to take it that they might have a relationship with. So it is a very complicated process. But I think we've also talked quite a bit about in terms of diversity as well. This is kind of a big factor as well because some of the people that are not having the right input in this process, they don't have the diverse background that I think the coaching community is certainly looking for, and that has led to some friction. And I think is one thing I know a lot of coaches would like to have either more transparency, in terms of a lot of these processes, or at least more input from those that are ultimately making the hire.
That is exactly right. And that's part of where I was going with this. Like, I think it's very important for fans to understand that this isn't exactly a meritocracy. And you can be a successful assistant coach or a successful head coach somewhere. And you might only honestly get hired at 8 Division I jobs because of always other things here, regardless of what you're doing on the court. And if the timing doesn't work out for those gigs, or some other weird the thing happens, you don't move up. And somebody who is connected in the right ways, or is the right face at the right time, who might not actually be as good of a coach. And if you get a couple cocktails in the athletic directors and presidents, they might agree with you. That person's still gonna move up. Like I as an example here, I don't want to use the individuals' names, but there, I sat in on a case study, and a couple athletic directors were speaking pretty candidly, and one of them said, listen, part of my job in these hires, because I'm at a lower resource institution, is risk management. So even if I believed that a assistant coach who had never been a head coach is the actual best recruiter, X's and O's mind, and best at developing relationships with athletes, I would be inclined to not hire that person who has the higher ceiling, because it is easier for me to manage my risk with somebody who sits in the head coach's chair. Because what so much of a Division I head basketball coach does is it about basketball. Some of it is about NIL. A lot of it is about fundraising. A lot of it is CEO kind of stuff. A lot of it is working with the university and academic and apparel and booster and all these other kids. There's a lot of, it's a lot of shaking hands and kissing babies kind of thing. And you may not know what you don't know as an assistant, where you might be more responsible in just doing the basketball stuff. So you're going to hear people say, like, that matters a lot. And this is important from a DEI perspective because college basketball does a decent, not a good enough, but a decent job of getting Black men and Black women involved as assistants, which you would expect given the player pool of the sport. Where we see a big issue, and this is true in college football, I'm sure it's true in other sports too, are getting men and women of color to move up from assistants to the head job. Some of that is due to unequal access to social connections. Some of that, if we're keeping it a buck, is due to honest to God racism. Even if the president, AD, and everyone else is on board, because if the white guys with money don't feel like they're going to connect with this person, or if they're not in the right country club fit, that can matter a lot, especially if you're a place that's really indebted to 10 or 11 people cutting big checks to your athletic department. That's a thing. That's a thing in college football too. But another thing is literally about having exposure to the right skills necessary to impress somebody in an interview to be able to move forward. And so now there's a couple of coaches that listen to this, but this is something that came up a lot. Is this idea of making sure that assistant coaches have an opportunity to develop executive management and executive leadership when they go up. Because if you're an assistant, ultimately, you need to be the best assistant you can possibly be, right? The thing I heard a lot of ADs and even some head coaches say is you got to lead from the seat that you're in. Just like, I might be able to provide advice or talk through things, but I can't run the D1 ticker enterprise. That's not my job. My job is to run extra points and to do a couple of other things kind of behind the scenes. But if you're an assistant, or if you're a graduate assistant or a Dobo or somebody else, you want to start asking, what are processes or things that I can own or make my thing? And as a head coach, then you got to think, what can I delegate? So somebody else is, okay, you are going to own operations. You're going to own our travel stuff. You assistant coach, you're going to start speaking to the media sometimes. You're going to write some of the advanced scouting reports. You're going to talk to the coach sometimes. And some coaches are really good at that. And some, I think that the pejorative term that I learned was the guy takes up so much control over his program and his assistants are clappers. Because all they can do is just sit in the sidelines and clap. Right? During a game, they're not the ones talking to players. They're not the ones drawing anything up over timeouts. I think we see this in college football too, right? You can see winning college football coaches that have large coaching trees. And you have some that win a lot of games where that doesn't, and no one's trying to hire their assistant coach because they know that person isn't really involved in the functionality of that program. And that is, I think, as head coaches and the rest of this ecosystem becomes more aware of that might actually help some of these coaches of color do a better job when they get into that interview because they've had a chance here to develop more of that skill set. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's very different too, in between basketball and football. I think football, I think everybody can kind of see just because there's so many, just the numbers are different that you can kind of see you have to delegate. You do have to say here, here's my cornerbacks coach, here's my defensive coordinator, and if you're an athletic director, if you're going through the search firm process, certainly they are able to kind of pull things that are very specific to that. Less so in basketball. It's like I know some assistant, will run practice, like that kind of insight in terms of how somebody is running practice as an assistant and how that can translate as a head coach. Most ADs are not kind of getting that insight. Maybe there is a personal connection to where they can ask around about how does this guy do things, how do they operate. That's certainly valuable information if you're a search firm and whatnot, and that's something that tries to get conveyed in the interview process. But it can be difficult to kind of parse out, like you're saying, ultimately where is that dividing line in terms of responsibilities, in terms of just kind of day to day between multiple assistants on staff and their head coach. And so I think that's why, certainly basketball is probably a little more difficult to conduct a search and try to find that right fit. As I'm sure you found out at the consortium there, but like football is a little bit different just because there's a lot of a lot of movement. Certainly there's a lot of, responsibilities that are divided up just by the nature of the game, less so in basketball. But I think the important part too is just when you get into that interview process, if you are a coach, if you are an assistant, how many times have we either known people that would make a great head coach, but just they're just not great interviewers. And when you're speaking with college presidents who, let's face it, they are coming from a different background. Maybe they're biochemist or whatnot. Trying to connect with them on a different level is way, way more difficult than, say, connecting with an 18-year-old that you're trying to recruit, right? And so translating that can be a challenge. And it certainly allows for some coaches to not get the shot that they probably deserve, and others, to probably kind of get ahead just because they are good in those settings, that they can kind of make up for things and learn a little bit once they ultimately get into one of those head coaching gigs.
The Will Muschamp principle, right? Like, and whatever you could want to say about Will Muschamp's results on the field, I think it's pretty indisputable. This is a guy that other coaches and other administrators and people within this community who have gotten to know him as a person, they love this dude. For whatever reason, he presents very well in that world. And that's why maybe he gets an extra year or an extra opportunity that, judging just when you watch on television, you would say, that doesn't make sense to me compared to maybe some other individuals, right? There's I had briefly worked in staffing before I got into this gig. So some of this advice is stuff that I think I would have taken for granted. Like, hey, even if your initial interview is over Zoom, you should wear a tie. I wouldn't have needed to be told that. But if you never had a job outside of coaching, and your wardrobe is just gym shorts and polos and with logos on them, maybe you need to be reminded about that. There's some norms on the academic side of the institution that maybe aren't the same way at the basketball court. So this was I think a useful experience. The last thing, and I think fans are aware of this as a concept, but I think it bears repeating again. Fit is really important, and that's true for every job. There are so many people who are good coaches. But a good coach might go into Pepperdine and might go into St. Louis and might go into Merrimack and have very different results, because those are very different places. And it's the same thing for anything else, right? Like, it is a blessing. I just turned 35. One of the really great things about being in your 30s is I think it is easier to really be comfortable with who you are. I am not old, but I'm too old, I think, to completely reinvent myself in a certain way. Like, listen, I know I am somebody that is, I'm going to wear New Balances. I own Hawaiian shirts. I like messing around in the garage. Y'all know my sense of humor. I know the kind of social situations where I'm comfortable and where I'm not. And that means that, there are other jobs where even if I know how to write and be successful, I'm not going to function very well in that environment. This was the big problem I had when I moved to New Orleans, right? I did not have cultural competency of the community where I was going to. I didn't know anybody in Louisiana. It was really hard. I know other people feel that way when they come to my neck of the woods and they realize, oh, wait a minute, humans need vitamin D to live. They don't have that here. I want to walk in front of a truck. That's a thing. And that's a thing in this world here too. You can't just necessarily plug and play people who know how to teach pick and roll principles and how to connect with 17-year-olds. Institutional fit, geographical fit, ideological fit between your bosses, just like with literally every job, is a big deal in college sports. And that's true for athletic directors. That's true for coaches, dobos, the works.
One and look, you're at the Final Four. What better example than those coaches right there? They've taken very different paths, but you can understand that they are kind of the complete package. You can understand, Coach K. For all the people that dislike how he runs his program, he understands how to get that entire enterprise moving in the right direction. He understands how to take advantage of things like working with USA Basketball and to kind of think ahead of how can that help my program when I'm coaching NBA stars in the Olympics. He understands certainly the X's and O's. You get that. He's out there grinding, watching tape. Before and after games and after wins and losses. Until midnight plus. So you understand that he still has that X's and O's background. You understand why Jay Wright certainly has that. Can walk into pretty much any living room and try to connect with kids when he's recruiting them, and obviously he's understands the fundamentals of the game, like making sure his kids know how to shoot free throws at clutch moments. There are things that these big time coaches. I mean, even look at Hubert Davis. Obviously, he came from he was a broadcaster, right? I think a a lot of folks understood that he was on college game day and certainly doing a big thing, but he put in the time, he put in the effort to sit there next to Roy Williams, not only recruiting kids and making those connections that an electric personality like Hubert has would translate on that front, but he also learned how to coach. He learned how to motivate his guys, and certainly the payoff was leading his team to the national championship as an 8 seed in his first year. So there are a whole lot of paths I think that you can take, and really for ADs and everybody looking for one of that next generation, one of those new guys. I think it is a difficult challenge nowadays because there is so much on the head coaching plate. But for those that do go into those interviews prepared, that can not only connect with a multitude of different just kind of personalities, but understand that they have to have a game plan on NIL. They have to have a game plan in terms of player development. How they use the portal. How it's a difficult job right now. It's getting more difficult given everything that is going on with the NCAA. But finding that right fit and making sure that from a coaching standpoint, that the institution is also aligned with what you kind of see in that program. That's a big thing nowadays, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see a lot of these other searches play out. We do have some big openings. You understand why Seton Hall went with somebody who's an alum, to replace Kevin Willard there, coming off a big NCAA tournament run as well. So you kind of get that. Those are the easy searches, right? But it's when you kind of got to go outside of your comfort zone, when you really kind of got to turn around a program and you're in the MAC or you're in the WCC, and maybe you're not the most well-resourced institution, trying to find that right fit as a new head coach. It can be difficult, but the payoff, is certainly there. And a lot of these programs are finding that this inexact science, a lot of it comes down to just kind of gut feel for a lot of these ADs. And I think for the coaches themselves, that's ultimately what they kind of don't want to hear, because sometimes they might not get a job that way.
I want to quickly talk about something else in the great fit world. Let's briefly talk about our sponsor, Home Field Apparel. If you want to pull off a new great fit with some officially licensed collegiate apparel that is comfortable and will get all of your friends, colleagues, and strangers talking in a good way, check out our friends at homefieldapparel.com. They make t-shirts, they make hoodies, crew necks, some sweatpants, all with the most unique designs in college athletics. Most of them coming from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all of those old logos that were buried in the yearbooks, buried in the school newspapers that your licensing department has forgotten. Home Field has a bunch of nerds that sit around and look through all that stuff and find them and then put them on clothes that fit really well and are very soft and look great. I'm wearing some Home Field stuff right now. I'm wearing my old Tron UCLA shirt. We got the Fighting Gamecocks right there. I've said this lots of times. This is probably 75% of my dress-up apparel, which then makes doing things like shooting Collegiate Sports Connect or going to conferences or are not supposed to wear T-shirts all the time a challenge. Home Field, if you make sports coats, I will buy several, or button-up shirts or ties, anything of that. Listen, I'm an idea man. Just throwing out some ideas for you. Home Field does not have every single school, but they have most of the schools and most of the schools that you would care about. They big new Saturday season 3 just finished, including a bunch of basketball-oriented institutions. But you've also got the national champions for both men's and women's basketball have shirts. Bunch of Division II schools, bunch of FCS schools. Chances are you're going to find something that you like, or a school that you have no attachment to whatsoever, which is just as good too. You can save 15% off your first order if somehow you haven't bought anything from these guys yet, which at this point, what are you doing? Use promo code Extra Points, save 15%. And if you are affiliated with a university or an athletic conference and you're thinking, Matt, how do I get my stuff on this list? Shoot me a note. I'm at matt@extrapointsmb.com. I helped introduce a conference office at their old vintage IP to our friends in Indianapolis a couple of days ago, along with a couple of other mid and low majors. Don't let your conference rival get the cool stuff on the internet first and get adopted by a whole bunch of other college sports nerds. That would be devastating. You should do it first, in my humble opinion. So reach out to me, and I will connect you with our friends at Home Field Apparel. Bryan, I've had my head down these past couple of days here. I haven't actually been checking Twitter. I haven't been reading newspapers. I literally just walked in the door like 2.5 hours ago. Surely I haven't missed any important college sports news during that time, right?
Oh, just another Power Five commissioner calling it quits. Other than that, I think you're good, my friend.
Of course. And in case you missed this by now, Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlsby has announced that he will be retiring. Bryan, this is. I know this is really great radio here. I'm a serious professional. Did he say when? This isn't effective immediately, right?
It is not immediately. I think they're once they kind of have selected a successor, he will end up sliding over and making the transition. Usually, these things tend to happen along the fiscal year calendar. So you would kind of expect hopefully the Big 12 would have somebody in place this summer, and certainly by like July 1st they would kind of transition out. That certainly happened with the Pac-12. In terms of that transition from Larry Scott to George Kliavkoff, he kind of came in, shadowed him a little bit, and then officially took over in the summer. I would imagine that a similar process is going to play out here. Look, this was kind of a move I think everybody expected. At some point, certainly Bob Bowlsby has been around 40 something odd years in college athletics, longtime AD, certainly at places like Iowa and Stanford before taking the Big 12 job. And look, he's kind of saved the league twice, and he's got a growing family of grandkids. I'm sure he wants to spend some additional time with them, and that was a motivator. I don't think anybody's truly taken aback by the fact that he's choosing now to kind of step away. You get a new guy in that can negotiate those media rights. You've obviously already had some expansion, so you can get some of the new members kind of on board with the new commissioner and let them at least have some input, I'm sure, in terms of the process, because those college presidents and AEs that are coming into the league really, are not only meeting their peers for the first time at conference meetings like they'll have in May in Arizona, but they're also trying to come together to find common ground. They need schedules. They need a lot of legwork to happen over these next couple of years. And given the league is in such transition, you can kind of understand why Bob Bowlsby wants to say, I made sure that we're on solid footing. We're a member of the Power Five. There's going to be a new playoff coming down the road as well that the new guy should probably kind of take over for me and in terms of speaking for the league. And I think it just kind of Bob said it's time, and it'll be interesting because these jobs tend to not come open all that often, and yet here we are with yet another Power Five opening.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by the timing either. I think you and I have even talked off air over the past couple of months that this seems to be a pretty natural point to do that. Let somebody else do the media deal. Let somebody else decide what the new membership is going to look like. There's some big transformational questions. You know that you are no longer in existential peril, right? Like which was a thing earlier this summer. It's easy to kind of speculate about who the next person is. I've already seen a few names already thrown out there. Like it's easy to say this is Oliver Luck can come in. And I am not prepared to have that conversation right now. I think what I'm more interested in, I'm interested to hear what you think is what kind of skill set or expertise do you think would be most important for this league? And I asked that by saying we could look at the last couple of years. I've had several new commissioners come in that didn't have super deep college sports backgrounds. Not just at the Power Five, but even at the mid-major level too. I think it's fair to say there's a learning curve. You could be a great sports executive. This industry is stupid. And things that made sense in the pros, you can't do exactly the same way. But I could definitely see the argument for, hey, the Big 12 is going to need to make all the money it possibly can. And so if you get somebody in there who knows a lot about broadcast media, linear media, new media potential, I could see that being very attractive. Pac-12 seems to have some success bringing in an executive from not just MLB Advanced Media, but MGM and the event space and that world. Maybe that's an option. Maybe you decide, hey, it's really important that we keep our autonomy designation. We're blowing up Division I right now. Maybe we need a Jim Phillips. Maybe we need an insider to advocate for us there. On that point, if you're sitting here with these university presidents, what kind of skills do you think would be most beneficial for this group of schools in the short term?
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the real big task for these presidents, not just finding somebody that fits the league, which it's a unique league. Look, I grew up in Big 12 country. Yeah, I've been around since literally the beginning of the league. Going back
Yeah.
to, those Southwest Conference days, and look, certainly the changing membership is going to contribute to the outlook being changed. This is no longer a Texas and Oklahoma show in terms of having that significant input on the commissioner for the first time in conference history, and so how that is going to impact things is going to be unique. I think you're right in terms of the new media rights, the negotiations, that sort of thing. That's going to be huge for the league itself because we had to navigate on certainly to talk about those projections not too long ago on this year podcast. And look, if you could guarantee Big 12 ads that they would basically be at or a little bit above what they're currently kind of sloped projected to get, I think they'd sign up for that. But getting that is going to be a challenge for the new guy. And having that media background, having the ability to sell the Big 12 as an entity to ESPN, to CBS, to NBC, to whoever is out there, is obviously going to be kind of the first line on the to-do list. And they're batting third. Unfortunately, they're going to go behind the Big Ten. They're going to go behind the Pac-12, which certainly has a unique rights negotiation coming up because they have even more on the table than the Big 12 does. They're probably going to come up even behind the college football playoff when you look at some of the timelines as well. So you got to factor in that as well. And I think more than anything, they need somebody that they can trust. I think that is a big thing, that somebody that can bring the league together to kind of shepherd them through what has been not only a rocky past 18 months or so for the league, but you can understand, given all the seismic changes between the playoff, between Division I changing as well this year, there's a lot to navigate for whoever is coming in. And having somebody that can pull Baylor and Texas Tech and TCU all in the same direction, as well as BYU and Cincinnati and UCF in these diverse schools that are kind of up and coming, it's going to be key. And I think you could look at some past ADs that could kind of fit that bill. I think there's going to be obviously a lot of talk, like you mentioned, with Oliver Luck. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some outsiders that do have their name kind of bandied about. But look, that might be a little scary if you're the college presidents, knowing that, let's face it, the Kevin Warren hire in the Big 12 probably has not been as smooth.
Yeah.
Big 12, like it's not been as smooth as I think they would have liked. Obviously, with the ACC going with Jim Phillips, that is somebody who is born and bred in college athletics, and still he's had some bumps in the road, transitioning kind of from Big Ten territory down to the ACC. So it's a challenge. I think there are folks like Ed Stewart at the Big 12 office. I'm sure he's going to put in for this job. That's maybe an internal name that could at least transition things as well alongside Bob Bowlsby, or maybe you just kind of want a clean break with the past in terms of that conference office as well. I think that could be another strategy these presidents are going to end up taking. It makes for, anytime you have these executive searches, it makes for a fascinating process, and it not only kind of tells us about where the league is heading, but really tells us about what the league wants to be. And I think that's going to really inform this search.
That's the big question, right? Because, I've joked about this a couple of times. Like my grand theory of conference realignment and of conference composition is, as institutional similarities decrease, if you aren't papering over those differences with money, your odds of dissolution or instability increase. And you look at this league now; it's a good sports league. Probably the best men's college basketball league in the country, even without Texas and Oklahoma. It's right now, right this very second, probably a better football league than the Pac-12, top to bottom. Close. I've crunched the S&P Plus numbers. There's not really a big difference. The big issue, one, is these schools don't really have anything in common. You've got two enormous research-ish faith-based institutions and one kind of Christian school. And I say that not as they're not authentically Christian, just like TCU has a more secular mandate than BYU or Baylor does. Nobody I wasn't impugning anybody's religiosity. You have land grant flagship state institutions. You have regional state schools. You have schools that were commuter schools a couple of years ago. You have schools that have been power schools for 70 years. You have UCF, which is built the whole thing on a credit card and kind of, rocketed shit into space in 20 years. And they're in 3 different time zones. They don't have a lot in common other than some shared history in the middle of the country. Other than we want to play sports at a super high level. They're going to have different needs academically, financially, broadcast wise, like athletically. So finding somebody that can bridge all those gaps, I think, is difficult. To say nothing then of shaping what is your league identity. And this is a major issue for Conference USA. I think it's an issue for the Summit League. I think it's an issue for some of these low major leagues right now. It's an issue in the WAC, and I think they're kind of figuring that out right now. It's certainly an issue for the Ohio Valley Conference. So I don't know. I'm hoping to maybe spend a little bit of time, making some phone calls, reading everything I can, obviously, to learn a little bit more about what these presidents are thinking and what kind of names are in here. I also think I'd want a little bit more time to do a proper retrospective on the Bowlsby era. I understand that there are many fans of Big 12 institutions that think about him pretty negatively. At first blush, I don't think that's entirely fair, but I don't think I've had a chance to properly meditate upon that question to give an impassioned defense one way or another. And just in part because we're talking about a lot of history, right? I don't think it would necessarily be fair to pin the guy's entire career off of something that Texas and Oklahoma did, although that's obviously part of the equation.
I would agree completely, and I think we will dive into this topic a little bit later on either a Collegiate Sports Connect video or on the podcast. But I would say, you mentioned the league itself. I mean, these are a lot of schools that I guess from a fan base standpoint, you kind of have a chip on your shoulder. These are not the flagship institutions like Texas and Oklahoma. Like TCU, they've been wandering the desert since the Southwest Conference broke up, and then they finally get into the Big 12, and they've gone through these leadership changes, and they've gone through these. Conference membership changes. It's been difficult for them to kind of find their footing. Obviously, Baylor, everything that's gone on there, but they've kind of corrected things to where really they're kind of the gold standard at this point in terms of institutional alignment between the athletic department, the school itself, their men's and women's basketball coaches and football coaches. I mean, they've got some long-term contracts. They've got the facilities in question. Baylor is a school that has changed completely over not only the last 10 years, given everything that's gone on their campus, but really the last 20 years as a university. And same as at Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, which is obviously entering a new era now with not having their rivals to the south in Norman there in the same league. That's a unique thing for them. That there's been close ties, obviously, with the Sooners given their proximity, but they're entering kind of a new era. And a lot of these schools are kind of the same way. You go from Iowa State, you go to UCF, which you mentioned. I mean, that was a former commuter campus that has really had some aspirations to do a lot more as a university. Athletics is a part of that. The same has been true at Houston, which has been trying to get into a league like the Big 12 for so long and put the money behind it to do so, to make sure that they're right there in terms of facilities and in terms of the athletic department revenues that they're going to come in and try to hit the ground running. It makes for a fascinating league. And let's face it, outside of once the SEC and the Big 10 and Pac-12 deals, there's going to be a lot of focus on ultimately what the Big 12 wants to be going forward. And whoever this new commissioner is going to play a big role in that. And these college presidents too, they have their own ideas because a lot of them are pretty hands-on with athletics compared to a lot of their peers, not just in the Power Five, but in their own states as well. So I think that is going to be another unique aspect of this search is that these college presidents, they not only know some folks that might end up being connected to the search, but they're also going to definitely have their own opinions in terms of what direction the league needs to go.
This is a good point. Gordon Gee is the president of West Virginia, and you say a lot of things about Gordon Gee. You say a lot of things about Gordon Gee. Gordon Gee would definitely say a lot of things about those things too. He's definitely hands-on with athletics. Dr. Livingstone at Baylor, I can't remember if she was a college athlete herself. I think she was, but
women's basketball, yeah,
that's right. And comes from a huge college sports family. Has been very involved with Mac Rhodes, and clearly has influence on that part of the institution as well. I can't speak to the president at every school in the league, but you are definitely right. This is I'll kind of wrap it up here on this. This search and where this league is going to be in 4 or 5 years, I think has the highest variance window, right? We know the Big Ten is going to get a truckload of money. And even if they make some crappy hires, they have the money to buy their way out of those hires. They're going to be what they are, right? The Pac-12, it probably can't get a lot worse than where it is right now, which is not really especially nationally relevant in major sports outside of a couple of exceptions, but has the potential to change that and change and whether that's financially or athletically and there's there's at least there's established brands there that we know have potential to do that. Big 12 could, there's a world where maybe they're maybe the best non-Big 10 SEC league in some cases. You could see a world where it kind of falls apart in 3 years and it ends up becoming the gentrified American Athletic Conference, depending on this deal and some hires and fits and potentially who they hire as their commissioner. I don't know how it's going to go yet. So this will be fun to follow along. We're going to continue to monitor this story on this podcast on Collegiate Sports Connect, which you can sign up for free and watch all the videos that Bryan and I and our colleagues are producing every single day. You'll see this more on Extra Points, which you can, of course, subscribe to at extrapointsmb.com. You can subscribe for free if you haven't already, or of course, get a full subscription for just $8 a month. And you'll be able to see what other people are saying across the internet on D1 Ticker, which is also free and a truly invaluable resource. And I promise you, I'm not saying that because they sign my checks. It is the only email other than my own that I open up every single time. And I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. They're all excellent. Sometimes I skip a day or two. I know you guys do that for me. That's okay. I write a lot. I'm not offended. I read the D1 Ticker every single day. Bryan, what have I forgotten to plug?
Well, I would just say that conference commissioners as well, ADs, a lot of folks out there in the industry also reading D1 Ticker, and that's why it's such a valuable resource. But yeah, you can find all the information not only in terms of what's kind of coming on and going on, the latest on searches like the Big 12 and who's up for certain AD gigs like that. All that is definitely in the Ticker, but the Collegiate Sports Connect videos are also in there, which you have links to them where a lot of the work that we've been doing in terms of some of these newsy topics, like the Big 12 search, NIL collectives. We've done a lot on recently. There's some big time interviews coming up with some ADs that have won ACT AD of the year. We've got some more conference commissioners as well that are sitting down in the Collegiate Sports Connect chair. So a lot of stuff coming over the next couple of weeks as we kind of transition away from basketball into the rest of the spring sports and kind of hit the ground running in terms of closing out this academic school year, because it's always interesting. I was actually talking with somebody today just in terms of like, this is kind of the little lull right now. You kind of have after the Final Four, there's a bit of a lull. Obviously, some folks might be a little bit interested in terms of like tax season and focusing on that. But like there's a little bit of a lull right now. I feel like on the sports calendar that picks up in a big way for a lot of these campuses with the spring sports kind of closing out, with graduation coming up in 6 to 8 weeks for a lot of schools as well. So it's like get through this is a little bit of push, and a great companion to that is certainly Extra Points and D1 Ticker.
Yeah, a lot of ADs and conference leaders also read Extra Points. I am grateful for that lull. I'm actually going to take some time off next week. We I believe are still planning on producing Going for Two. There's going to be some content on Extra Points while I'm out, but there's not really an off season in our world. This is kind of the closest thing to it. But we'll have lots of stuff for you to listen to read, and to watch. Thank you for sticking with us, everybody. It's great to be back. We'll catch up with you in a couple of days.